Thanks, everybody, for coming today. I know there is a lot of fun stuff here at AWE, so it means a lot to us that y'all came for our session. Now, DEIA, it's a bit of a dirty word these days, but it stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And in a lot of ways, it is our modern day incarnation of the civil rights movement, of the fight for equal rights and dignity for all. Now, the current US administration has been pretty adamant that DEI itself is discriminatory. But of course, this is the same administration that removed pictures of the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped bombs that ended World War II, from their military websites. So they may not have the best track record on the subject. You know, maybe they prefer to be named the Enola Strait instead. I don't know. But we're not here today to rail against the current administration and their actions, even if some of them are maybe happening a little close to home for anybody who drove through Los Angeles on Sunday. We're not here to preach to you and say that diversity is the ultimate good and that anyone who disagrees is racist, misogynist, ableist, or any other kind of ist. We are here to tell you why investing in DEIA, investing in diversity, in equity, in inclusion, in accessibility will make your organization better. It will make you more creative, more perceptive, more efficient. It will improve your market share and make you better able to talk to the people that make up your organization and your following. And why it's especially important for extended reality, a technology in which we are so often asked to immerse ourselves. So, as we were just introduced, I'm Dylan Fox. I'm the Director of Operations for XR Access at Cornell Tech. Here today with our wonderful panelists, who you just heard their names, so I'll let them give a longer introduction as they start to answer the questions. And I will say we left some time at the end of this for Q&A, for your questions, because we want to talk to you as well. So for the moment, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first question, since this is the Augmented World Expo, it's about augmented and extended reality, how are DEIA and XR fundamentally linked, and why is it so important to XR as an industry to get this right? And we're going to start with Stephanie.
Great, thanks, Dylan. Just a little bit about me. So I'm the Senior Vice President of Research and Best Practices at the XR Association. The XR Association was founded 6-7 years ago and coming together with the manufacturers and the developers to build a responsible immersive technology space. And so one of our core tenets of that is accessibility. Our members have always been interested in making sure that the market is broad enough that everybody can participate in the next compute platform. We don't want to repeat mistakes of the past when we brought mobility to life and advanced interoperability compute platform, which we're all enjoying today and have been for a while. So I do want to share with you today and answer that question that it's very foundational as we talk about this compute platform and immersive technologies that we include the broadest market possible. And one of the ways we do that is by making sure that our products can be met where they are. So we want to make sure that we're doing accessibility by design, right? We talk about that a lot. So don't think about it at the end, think about it at the beginning. In the enterprise spaces where we're now meeting technology, because as we all know here, it's well beyond gaming, although that's a gigantic market, and entertainment and bringing delight. But this technology has the ability to really make processes more efficient, solve core problems for people and for living, has amazing healthcare outcomes, amazing education outcomes. As we talk about manufacturing and automation, this is a key tool in advancing efficiencies in that space. So it really is making sure that those workforces, the people that are participating, everybody here is going to need a hospital at some point. You're all going to want the hospital technology to meet you where you are at that moment, right? Whether that's with an arm that doesn't work, right? Or not feeling well. So that's really important to do that here. And so we're very excited and believe that really this is foundational work as we talk about DEIA so that people can actually use the tools the way they're meant to be used.
If I could add a little bit to that. I feel like DEIA is not just a featured layer. It should be more so an operating system, something that is embedded. And when it is put as a featured layer, there are underlying tones and actions that make it seem like it's arbitrary, which give it a bad rap. Essentially, with that, we're not asking for too much, just more so, just everybody wants to be seen, everybody wants to be heard, and that could mitigate exclusionary bugs. There's been cases where, there have been teams who have worked on projects involving hand tracking, and it works great for somebody, and then when it's put out to everybody, it's like, oh, it doesn't read my hands. Well, okay, that means you didn't test with a wider, diverse pool. So, it's important to make sure that we extend the range of who we test for if we want a broader reach in this technology.
So talking about inclusive design, it should not just be an afterthought. And I think that's one of the issues that most enterprise industries do have, is that they don't think about DEIA and accessibility as part of their DNA. I call it it shouldn't be like, it should start from the beginning, when it should be part of your roadmap. You shouldn't wait till when you're about to deploy to the general public that you remember that, oh, there's this sample of your population size that you have neglected without realizing it. That's why situations where testing comes in, you test a product and realize, oh, it doesn't work on this set of population size or this sample size. So it's really important that our technologies, especially in the XR space, should include everyone.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Diaz. So I do community design in immersive VR. I'm also an environmental designer. And it's been a core passion for me to demonstrate use cases of DEI in XR. I know some people recognize it as a type of empathy tool. We get to see other realities, what's possible, and we get to see through other people's eyes. And especially with a creator economy, we get to watch people develop. And that's been a real passion for me, is getting to see iteration in progress. It's cheaper to build our dreams than ever before. And a lot of the field of XR, I think, had a popular modeling of Ready Player One. And in that universe, it looked to me like we had really lost touch with the earth and lost touch with each other. We were lost in a fantasy realm of winning, and it wasn't sustainable. And so even though there's kind of a glory to being superpowered, at least in our minds, the ultimate message of that film and that book was we have to wake up and prioritize our connections with each other. We have to leave that metaverse idea and come back and be in relationship with our physical humanity. And so my hope is that we're embodying a message as a team up here that the opportunity of DEIA is to slow down and use this technology on purpose to make ourselves better and holding more concepts than our one perspective brings. It's an opportunity to really connect to our planet and each other and collaborate on a better vision of how we can sustain ourselves.
Talking about VR and embodiment, it's also a way to drive empathy. When Dr. Ruth just talked about empathy, I thought about one of the world hops that I did and experienced what it means to be an amputee. You know, I have my 2 legs, everything's complete, but just be immersed in that world and being able to wake up one day, you want to move to another space and you find yourself, you have to attach your prosthetic. I've never experienced it in real life. I have seen it on TV, But to use XR or VR itself to immerse yourself, to embody that space and be able to empathize with individuals. And having that impact, it's only possible if we start building with a future state that this is the hope we see, and this is what we want. And that's why I believe that it's something that we should start from the beginning. It should be design, accessibility, XR, whatever technology you're building should start from the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, if we can avoid messing up XR the way that we messed up PDF and made that into an accessibility abomination, a generation of accessibility testers will thank us. All right, so in the last year, we've seen executive orders banning illegal DEI, and a lot of major companies like Meta, Walmart, Target, and Amazon have been laying off their DEI teams and quietly removing references to diversity, to equity, to inclusion from their investor reports. What explains this current backlash against DEIA? What will be the short-term and long-term effects of this backlash, and how can we adapt to some of these criticisms, some of which may be legitimate, and move past them?
They're all looking at me.
Who wants to start us off?
So if we think about what diversity is many, many paths, many perspectives. Dichotomy is two paths, black and white. When I'm in survival mode, I'm going to be more tunnel visioned, and I'm going to be more trying to manifest outside of me something that looks like me, that feels like me, that makes me feel safe. And diversity is about spreading that perspective, going out of that tunnel vision and getting into a peripheral vision and taking in the landscape and really taking in the beauty. And so that backlash to me is kind of an allergic response that has happened out of a place of grief, where some ways that this implementation of DEI has created a sense of shame and conformity instead of celebration and empowerment. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the speed that our systems are moving at, and that we don't have emotional fluency to know what we're feeling, to slow down our work and our projecting, and actually process our relationships and ask ourselves, who isn't in the room? Who are we not even thinking about right now that could be hurt by what we're building? Those aren't easy answers. It's a great idea, I think, initially for all of us to say, yeah, diversity, let's have more perspectives. But in practice, it can look like inside of me, when I'm trying to choose one versus the other, is to remember there's always a third choice and a fourth choice. There's gradients of answers. And for these big companies, I believe what it's reflecting is a lack of integration of DEI values inside these decision makers, and maybe just that need to simplify and feel like they're conforming again to what is popular, or feeling punished for being more inclusive and speaking that language. So that's my answer.
That's a good answer. And I feel like out of that backlash, you get some short-term practices happening, maybe like grants tailored for diverse groups getting cut, slashed. I work in education. A lot of the grants that we use in education to help fund field trips, help fund resources have been slashed. They're gone. No more money. So now it's like, where do we get that money from? And it all comes from, like you said, how DEIA has been implemented. It's not DEIA itself, it's just the current implementation has not been thorough, and it hasn't been, the word I'm looking for, it hasn't truly been valued the way it's supposed to. It's been kind of performative. if you really want to talk about it, it's been very performative and ingenuine. So the short of that is things get slashed, things get taken away. Then it's like, we're left with what? Now I have to find other ways to get this money to help support the kids and their ventures and helping them learn and understand things, and it can be a struggle. And then the long term is you're missing out on a whole market base, a whole range of people who understand how this world works just as you do and can help make it a better one to live in. So you're missing market margins, you're missing so many opportunities in long term from original bad implementation, which goes into what I said with the first question is, it shouldn't be a feature. It should be embedded, it should be the OS. DEIA should be embedded in your first thought. When you do your startup, when you do your organization, these things should be at the forefront of your mind because you'll pay for it later. So it's either you pay it forward now or pay the repercussions later.
That's true.
So I started checking the numbers, and I checked the World Health Organization, and I have it quoted here, that 16% of the global population, that is about 1.3 billion people, live with a disability. And then we have more than 28.7%, or nearly 70 million people that live with disability just in the United States alone. That's disability. That's the population size. That's a sample. Then we have another sample. According to UNDP, we have more than 250 million people that are from underserved communities. That number is just another population size or a sample. There are other numbers that we can't quantify within the DEIA spectrum itself. And when you're talking about technology itself, and then you focus on one sample size, does that reflect what you have in the whole world, for example, or within your community? So when you say, okay, 1.3 billion, you're like almost losing 1.3 billion. Convert that to dollars. And now think about that sample size, because I think most organizations think about profit and loss. Now convert just that amount into dollars, and how much are you losing? So that's why I feel that excluding these communities, that we are counting them as numbers, unfortunately, it's not an oversight, it's a systematic failure, and we risk alienating a significant number of people. So that's one thing. I feel that this rollback and the long-term effect is that there will be no research into those technologies. There will be no research into how to make much more customizable avatars, or avatars that look like me, or avatars that look like her, or any of us here. Avatars that have fantastic braids. I'm selfish, sorry. And it costs money to do this. I've worked in that industry, and I know it costs money. But with this rollback, who has that time? Because the world is moving fast. So the whole rollbacks will affect our long-term vision and set us up backwards by 10 to 20 years.
Wow.
It's just an estimate.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that is any accessibility professional will tell you the cost of doing accessibility from the start is about this much. The cost of doing a giant accessibility retrofit after your product has been out for 10 years, it kind of goes into the next conference room, right? So yeah, these costs will kind of magnify themselves over time. The earlier that we take action to correct it, the better. So I want to do the flip side of that now. So even as we've had some of these companies really pull back on DEIA, other companies have been sticking to their guns, right? Companies that kept DEI commitments, like Patagonia, Costco, Microsoft, and Apple, they saw higher reputation scores in 2025, according to an Axios Axios Harris poll last month. And so I want to talk now about the benefits, right? How can diversity and accessibility make organizations and applications stronger and more profitable? And what return on investment will the organizations that really stick to their DEIA goals as more than just lip service, what will they see?
So I think I'm going to springboard off of Devin, who kind of lightly touched on this, but in an early rollout for hand tracking, I think we all know that they only saw one color of hands, right? They missed a whole demographic by not having other diverse people in the room during the testing, right? That was corrected pretty quickly, but you still had to go back and correct it. Whereas if they had started thinking about, okay, when we're doing this technology, hand tracking, or things like that, when we want to see, we should test it out at different colors of skin and see what it looks like, right? This whole issue actually kind of transcends even XR technology, because even in areas that maybe you wouldn't think of, like ballet, all the tights were always pink. Now you don't see that anymore because they thought about diversity and brought that into their space, right? So, and therefore broaden the audiences that would come and see what was going on for that artistry. And art is all throughout XR too, and so having that representation really broadens your audience. Beyond that, diverse teams have been shown to have a bottom line increase of around 20% in the reach and market share and gains of the companies that have done those. So, I mean, there is a bottom line reason that organizations should be looking at diversity to start with, and really make market improvements.
Yeah, what I believe, kind of going back to that last question, when we call out performative, that can create a constriction inside of us. We're like, okay, DEI is good, but I shouldn't perform it. And I think developmentally, the way we learn first as human beings is people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we perform that. We dress up in Halloween costumes. We act it out and we make mistakes and we don't really know what we're doing. That's a higher risk for companies to perform and to be afraid of getting it wrong and getting called out. We are definitely in a very punitive culture. So I have a lot of empathy for the human beings who are trying to make decisions for organizations and feeling like they can't make that decision for this bigger group. And their job is to help the organization survive. And I would invite everybody to think about it in the binary of allyship versus accompliceship. That allyship is that overt action. It's an activism, and it is recognized because it is a disruptive force many times. Whereas accompliceship, I understand as more of a covert and a subversive type of disruption. It's a sometimes sustainable way to deal with many layers of oppressive forces. So my hope for the companies who have removed that language, even though they're also removing their accountability, is that they have a lot of accomplices in those companies that are finding ways to do deeper structural transformation and come back with stronger language and stronger goals. And for whoever is here that maybe has a very small company, maybe you're a company of one and this just feels like a really big idea to be like these bigger companies, Apple or whatever, that are sticking to their guns. My invitation is to think about it more like a spiral journey than an accomplishment, and now you are DEI representative. Is that the idea that I love to see in XR when I review products is there one language added? Is there one accessibility feature added? That message reaches your audience and your group of followers in a big way. And it isn't including all the languages. It isn't doing everything at once. It is a practice of saying, I agree that people who are not like me belong here. And I'm making this for them too. And then these smaller companies with products learn from each other, and it starts a conversation. How do we make this not just more accessible, but more vibrant and more representative of the culture and the humanity we want to be? And so my guess is for these companies who have maintained this language, it is demonstrating that they're not putting on the astronaut outfit just for Halloween. They are being the astronauts, and they are willing to stick with their course because they've found genuine benefit from it as human beings. They don't want to stop having those conversations, and they want to keep making room and expanding, not just to profit, but to practice. Even though it is more uncomfortable and we get it wrong a lot, I get it wrong a lot, it becomes a way of life. And it creates a type of humbleness, like I expect to mess up a lot. And so that would be my invitation is let's hope and look for the co-conspirators and accomplices that are inside all of us and manifest that. Oh.
So I thought about an example of creating an accessibility feature within mixed reality, and being, Hamilton saying, I want to be in the room where it happens. I was in the room where it happened, and having to work with amazing individuals to create a feature where low vision users are able to create and customize their avatars, and then testing it out with an ERG community, the low vision users within that ERG community. The first time we tested it, the first response was, this is painful to use. That was a punch in the guts for a PM, for all of us, because we were so happy. But we don't have their lived experience. But then getting their feedback and just doing that work, and then coming back and they are testing it, and seeing the satisfaction on their faces, and saying, this is really good. This is good job. Now, as a company, that's me feeling like I've done something close to God, probably, and all of a sudden then think of a company that is doing this user satisfaction times X, it's 100X much more better. You get much more market share. You get more potentials, more user engagement is increased. So at the end of the day, it's not just performative, it's not lip service. You are doing something great, and you will get that followership. And that is what I see with big companies that you just mentioned today.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I know I've seen plenty of times, specifically in the context of accessibility, when, people will say, oh, I don't want to put all this effort into making this feature that only some portion of the population is going to use, right? And I think we've seen first that it's a much bigger portion than you think. There's some metric that's, I think it's like 80 or 90% of users prefer subtitles on Netflix. It's wild. And second, that oftentimes when you're investing in these features, yes, you're putting in the work to make things, for example, accessible to people that may have disabilities. You're also making it accessible to people in different cultures, and you're making it accessible to computers, to machines. There's things like captioning in social VR turns really easily into real-time translation in social VR because you've laid that infrastructure. And I think similarly, when we're talking about kind of DEIA values in general, laying that infrastructure and getting into the practice of listening to people, you'll be amazed what you'll hear that wasn't what you originally set out to look for, right? So I think continuing on that note, I want to dig into some of the specifics, right? What are some really good examples of diversity and accessibility in practice when it comes to XR platforms and applications, right? So for example, the Apple Vision Pro, it launched with a whole suite of iOS accessibility tools, which makes it, I think, the first and still possibly the only mixed reality device to have a functional platform level screen reader, right? Because that was something they had on iOS, and they said, well, why wouldn't we incorporate that into this platform? And yet I've seen plenty of other companies who seem to have just kind of completely forgotten every rule of accessibility when it came to launching their MVP. So yeah, I'd love to hear from y'all, like, what are some kind of success stories that people can look at and take inspiration from when it comes to really hitting those targets?
Sure, so I can start again. So one of our member companies, Alchemy Labs, some of you might be familiar with them, vacation simulator, job simulator. When they rolled out their Cosmonius High, when they were designing that game, they put alt text tables column in their object model table. So they built that in right from the beginning. They considered that. Whether they used that or not, they were going to start foundationally to have space for other versions of that game. And then I believe it was in 2023, they rolled out their Cosmonius High Vision Beta. You can find that on Steam. They set that up and they tested that with low vision users and gave them a series of tasks to accomplish in the lobby. And all, to your point, were 100% successful. They could all accomplish the task with what they had designed. But they started, when they were ideating the game, considering where they might end up and how they might include a low vision feature in the back end. So that's a huge success case for how they managed to pull that out. In addition, nothing about us without us, we talk about that a lot in this community, they made sure to bring in advisors and all the way through their processes. They were designing their low vision beta to have developers come in who were low vision and see, this is what we're doing, how does this work for you, and make sure that they were benchmarking constantly against that. So yeah, very successful.
Now, I want to add on to that. I don't know if this made it into the end game or not, but I know they had that big like alt text list for each element. Part of it, one set entry in that table was like the description of like, this is what you're picking up. And they had a whole nother entry that was like funny commentary of like reading the mind of every object and like seeing what's on its thoughts.
Alt text for space banana was kind of tricky because it was sort of a space banana, but what does that mean?
Right. But like the ability to take something like that and then use it to apply it to have an alternate mode that's just like extra funny commentary for everybody.
Right.
Again, I don't know if that made it into the final version, but I love that as like a multi-purpose feature. Mm-hmm. But other examples folks want to bring up?
There is an example. There is a VR experience called 1,000 Cut Journey. It lets you live 3 episodes of basically an anti-Black racism. It basically takes you through the adolescence, the youth, and then the adulthood of the experience of a Black man. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been a Black man. But sometimes it's real hard. It is very hard. And there are things that experience brings out that I identify with. And as far as it tugs on this string, it tugs on the strings as an empathy engine. So to fully affect change, we need to start with understanding. When we understand someone, something, where we are, it makes it easy to change, makes it easy to adapt so that now when understanding comes in, okay, I was able to empathize, I was able to experience, I was able to walk through some of the things that you've walked through, I understand, and I'm sorry. I was like, don't apologize to me. You didn't do anything to me, bro. Like, you're good. But I'm glad that you understand. And that's an experience that's available. I think it's on the Steam store. I personally don't even like using it because it just makes me so uncomfortable. Like, and that's the whole thing. Me as a Black man who has been through things relative to that nature feels uncomfortable using it.
Yeah.
That should already show you that it's not the same. So I feel like that's a powerful use of XR as an empathy engine to help you understand and see from a different perspective. Take yourself out of your own shoes for a second, live a few steps in mine. So
I have such a long list of good examples, but one thing I would encourage everybody to try is think of your favorite XR experience when you come in embodied, especially if it's VR and you're fully immersed. What skin color are the hands? And how often does that default to white or white passing hands? And sometimes I've heard people talk about the shock of coming into the rare application that actually defaults it to darker hands. And that in itself is this micro wake-up call of how we live in a culture that centers whiteness. And it really is these design choices, like even just default avatars in games often are white and white male. And when that isn't true, it gets people's attention, everybody's attention, because now we're learning. And now we're curious about who the developers are and how this was an actual design choice and what kind of culture we're going to see in a space that is defaulting to white versus defaulting to not white and not immediately taking us into an unconscious place. I've found so many different games that have, I know that they had somebody on the team that was making space for a marginalized group. And it's not advertised, it's not on the front cover about their experience, but it still works. Like you were saying about the translation piece in VR chat, there is the ability to type instead of speak, and how different cultures and different languages are learning through either sign language or through typing. They're building really deep and meaningful relationships together because of this one inclusivity piece. So there is a type of magic that comes from striving to make space. And that's what DEIA means to me in these different applications. When I don't see that, I get worried, because what that tells me is that the team is in a groupthink mode. And groupthink is siloed, and it can actually make really harmful products, but also not sustainable or successful products.
I was just thinking about an experience. Okay, let me not say that. But have you tried to create an avatar if you're from a different part of the world? And let's say we have Southeast Asians, then, let me just categorize it, I'm about to offend people, but we have the Indians, then we have, let's say, example, Indian, Chinese, East African, South African, North American, and others. And then you, maybe as a Chinese person, decide to create an avatar. And for some reason, your avatar looks very Eurocentric. But it said you try to pick a character, an avatar that looks like you, and it has just a very Eurocentric feature. Now think about, how did they plan this rig of the avatar? What was the research behind it? And who gave the go-ahead to release this product? And what makes you think that if that's an Asian that feels that the Eurocentric features does not define, does not say that that's him, what about me, a black person? I don't have Eurocentric features. Hell, I don't even look like an East African. I don't look like a South African. I'm a West African. So it requires a lot of research. It still goes back to inclusive designs. It should start from beginning. You don't want to go back and start, did you call it retrofit? There's a better word for it also. Like engineers will be like, yeah, we have to release this. Oh, we missed this. Oh, we have to fix this. The cost of fixing, you have saved yourself a lot of trouble when you started from beginning. Inclusivity, DEIA, whatever language you call it, should be in our DNA. It should be in every product that we are releasing to the public. So I do believe that examples like Apple Vision Pro, I know that I do like they start thinking about low vision users, or there's that Zoom effect, there's that voice to text. They start training our parents from iPhone 5 or 2005 iPhone to Vision Pro. So nothing is surprising. When you go and use the headset, you know how to navigate. Why? Because they've trained you from the first iPhone, iOS, to Mac OS, to wherever you're going to. So organizations and big and small, enterprise or startups, we have to start thinking in that perspective. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, I think we've got about 9 or 10 minutes left, so I want to do one last question, and then we'll open it up to hopefully get one or two from the audience. So just, I think, real quick, how can we best support more people, especially those from diverse backgrounds, getting into XR? And what are some actionable steps for organizations that want to be more inclusive? So I'd say just for each of you, your top tip for either individuals or organizations to help make all of this happen.
Well, I'll speak very briefly. As an educator, the thing that even brought me into education is understanding and seeing the lack of exposure. I worked in East Oakland. I used to play basketball at the park. I would talk to the kids. They didn't have any resources. They didn't have any mentors, nothing to do after school. They would just go to the park and act up, and I would play basketball with them. But it led me to really seek out an organization that is doing something positive for the kids of East Oakland. And I joined an organization. They gave me free rein to do a curriculum. And I said, I'm going to teach kids how to build WebXR. And it starts with exposure, ultimately. How would they ever know if they've never tried, experienced, or stepped foot in a headset, or the feeling that they get when they input a line of code and the block starts spinning? They're like, oh, that's so cool, I made that happen. Like, yeah. And you can do so much more. And it's about fitting in something simple and doable within a small amount of time. So implementing workshops, different types of events to expose kids and people in general to these technologies. It's just all about exposure.
And on the organization, startup, developer side, we've said it a lot here today, but bake it in, right? It's your standard operating procedure to look at broader audiences, to use multiple languages, to look at representation, right? It doesn't have to be a special program that can be cut, like Target, right? It can just be your SOP, right? And do what you can, get started. Don't we all know that this whole topic is so hard to just, which part are you gonna pick? How are you gonna even begin? But part of the advice I would give is pick something and go. Start. The market is out there, it's huge. If you do it right, they will be your best super promoter ever. Just get going.
XR tools, there are lots of tools that you could use. You can leverage XR Access, and then you can also do partnerships with different organizations. I know that he talked about young people. We have people that I am passionate about, older folks as well. We have our parents, we have people 60 and above that are not tech savvy, and they are curious, they want to learn. So there's opportunities out there to even train our elderly folks to learn XR. There are lots of ways to get those diverse opinions from that.
So I have a lot of ideas, but my top one that I'm practicing right now is I lead a group called Bridge Makers. It's for community builders in social VR. And one of the things we do every Friday night is we get together as community leaders and sometimes world creators who will come together, and for the second hour of our evening, the first hour is we talk about the pain points of building community, and we tell the truth. And this is a live stream, so you can find this on our YouTube channel. But the second hour, we actually do world hops, and we go to different worlds. Sometimes the creators come and bring us to their worlds. And we ask the question, how does this world make community? Like, how does it make it? Why does it make it, et cetera? But the second question is, how does it break community? Who is this not built for? How does this world shun people? How does it make them feel like they don't belong here? That's a hard question to answer, especially in user-generated spaces that it was created for their friends because they want to hang out with people. You know, it's a very simple construct. But I think starting there with creators that are already getting their feet and wanting or dreaming of becoming professionals that are paid, those two questions are helping them look at all their environments very differently. And that would then also apply to the levels of the tools and the user design. How does it make community and how does it break it? And sometimes, you know, we'll go to an underwater world and we'll say, for people who are afraid of drowning, this might really repel them to be 20 feet under the ocean. Or, you know, when we go to a very big feast and we're like, oh, there's nuts here, maybe for people with nut allergies. We get silly, right? But we also have deeper conversations about who we're not looking for, who might go away if they came first to this space. And that would be what I would recommend, is look for that question in your product or whatever you're building. Who is it repelling?
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. We got 5 minutes, it sounds like. Do we have a microphone, and is there anybody who'd like to ask a question? Awesome. And before I forget, shameless plug, the XR Access Symposium is happening in 2 weeks from now, June 26th and 27th. That's going to be live in New York City and broadcast on Zoom. So come check that out as well if you're interested in this stuff. But please, question from the audience.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing panel. I wanted to ask if you have any advice to fight for diverse testing when we're creating an XR application, and if you have any sort of statistics or insights on how to convince other people to subscribe to the testing process so we can actually make it inclusive and not just like slap on all the diversity requirements and assume that it works.
I would like to just touch on that. As part of having an inclusive design is to just be allies as well, whereby even the developers could be the testers. Like when I was testing for low vision users using screen reader and tab navigation, I'm not a low vision user. Well, I'm getting older, yeah. But you know, but it required me to empathize and figure out how will this work for someone that is a low vision user. So we first could be the allies, and then we can also look into the community. Like there are those that create Discord channels to invite tests, people that will volunteer to test their apps and give feedback, and maybe do a bug bash as well, pizza and bugs. Yeah, I hope that works.
Yeah, I'd add that you can sell your product owners on the fact that if your product works for somebody who is blind, it works for somebody who's deaf, it works for somebody who's like got no arms, and it works for somebody who's neurodiverse, then it'll work for damn well anybody, right? The robustness of your testing is going to be so much stronger if you bring in more diverse testers. And so just focusing on the fact that you are going to get a stronger product out of this. It's not just hitting a thing on a checklist or, you know, for the purely ethical reasons. It's about you're going to get a better product at the end of it if you go through the effort of making more diverse.
And you can also think about situational accessibility. And we talk about permanent as well, but
Right.
If somebody has pink eye, they can't see out of one eye, can they still play or do your engagement, right? If they broke their arm, can they still do your thing, if something else is going on? So there's that angle as well. So it's still broadening your audience and your market, to your point. It is expensive and hard, so to convince somebody else to bring more testers in, that's a big challenge, and I could totally see that. Discord is a nice way to do it, for sure, but that crowdsourcing as well, and there's some communities out there that can help with that.
Okay, I think we're being given the sign to wrap it up. So we'll take some questions here, maybe in the hallway. And again, thanks so much to our panel here. Thanks so much to everybody who came out. Thank you to AWE for having us here, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah.